Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cornerstone. So grateful to see each and every one of you here. If you're a guest with us today, I want to say a special word of welcome. So thankful that you're here. Hope you'll stick around for just a little bit. Give us an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. I want to tell you about a couple things as we get started this morning. We're right in the middle of a study in the book of Nehemiah. And on our back table right back here, we've got some of these handy dandy journals that if you like to journal, kind of follow along with the study, take some notes. We've got quite a few of those back there. You are welcome to take one of these as our gift to you as you study and dive in a little bit more into God's Word. And so I am not going to be offended at this point. If you want to hop up and go over there and grab one of those, there's plenty of them right there on the back table. Love for you to take one of those with you this morning. This last week, I was spending some time with my kiddos, and I was talking to one of my daughters. She is grown and out of the house, a young mom starting her own family, and she said, "Dad, you know what one of my very favorite memories of you are?" And I thought about that for just a moment. My heart began to well up a little bit, a little bit prideful, thinking, this is the moment. This is the payoff, right? She's going to just shower me with all the great legacy father things that I, imparted on her. And as I was just in that moment, I thought, wow, I wonder what she's going to say. I wonder what memory is going to really stand out. Was it that camping trip, that I planned and executed, and it was such a great trip for our family? Or was it that one conversation that we had that was just, a pivotal point in her life? Or was it, her graduation day where I just imparted some great words of wisdom that has allowed her to become a great success in life? And she said, "Dad, you know what one of my favorite memories of you is?" She said, "Remember when we were little, you used to gather us up before bedtime, and you would make up those stories, and use all those funny voices, and those were just great memories." And I thought about that for a moment, and for just a slight moment, I was a little bit offended. Because I think about all the things that I have given my children. I mean, all the time that I spent investing, working hard to provide for them. I think about all the extra hours and things that I did along the way, coaching their sports teams or helping out at school, or when they came and needed help with homework. Well, they didn't always come to me for the help with homework, but their mother was really good at that. But all the things that I did for them, the one thing that she said that she, was one of her favorite memories was made up stories. Now, I could have been offended, but the more I thought about that, the more I thought, you know what? It was in those moments with my kids that I was very connected. There were no distractions. It was all about them. And I was very focused on them. So often in life, in our relationships with our kids, with our spouse, with our friends, with our family, sometimes we are present in a room bodily, but mentally we're checked out. We're somewhere else, right? We're distracted by a screen, or we're thinking about things in our head, or maybe we're 3 feet into, tomorrow's to-do list. And we very easily get distracted and miss the point of our time together. Now, it got me thinking this week. I've really been thinking about just all those times in my relationship with my family, with my kids. And I've been wondering, what is that ratio of those times where I was truly present and the times that I was kind of checked out? I wonder what that number is. I know that's something different for all of you, but I'll be the first one to confess. I'm not proud of those moments when I've been with my family or been with those folks that I care about, and I wasn't fully engaged with them. I don't know what that number is, but I can guarantee you my kids do. They know the times that I'm checked out, that I'm not really paying attention. I'm in the room, but I'm not really present. Now, this is what I want to spend a little time talking about today. Not talking about a relationship paradigm shift, not talking about 5 habits that are going to change your life, but really one simple idea. You can be in a room and still be missing. Have you ever found yourself doing that? You're with somebody, but you're not really with them. Now, I found a very clear picture of what this actually looks like when we are to really show up in one of the most underrated books of the Bible. It's the book of Nehemiah. We have this leader who is far from home, but he's on a journey back to restore the city that he loves. And Nehemiah is there, and there's a pile of rubble. And there's a crisis in the middle of his situation that has nothing to do with the wall that we've been talking about the last few weeks in our study of Nehemiah. But before we get into our text, I want to just kind of pose a question for you just to think about this morning. And this question isn't a rhetorical question. I really want you to wrestle with it. The question is this: at the end of your life, how will the people in your life describe you? What do you want them to say about you? Think about that for a little bit. How do you want the people in your life to describe who you are and what your life is about? Now, I know for some of you that conversation is complicated because the people in your life that were supposed to shape you maybe weren't always present. Maybe they were absent. Maybe they were checked out. Maybe the people in your life that were supposed to shape you were there, but the damage they did along the way was not helpful. And so you've spent a big portion of your life trying to understand what that presence really looks like and how do I live that out with the people that I care about. And some of you, I know you had some great role models in your life. You had some great examples of what presence, of being connected and showing that true, genuine connection with your parents or grandparents or family or somebody that really had a big influence on you. And you've spent a big portion of your life just trying to compare yourself, just saying, am I really living up to what I was given, what I was shown? And that's something that's constantly on your mind. This morning, we're going to continue on in our study in the book of Nehemiah. And so if you would, open up your Bibles. Nehemiah chapter 5 is where we're going to be. In case you haven't been with us or maybe you're new to the Bible, I want to kind of catch you up just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I want to give you a little bit of background information. So here we have this man named Nehemiah, and he's a Jewish leader, but he's living in exile. He's hundreds of miles away from his home city, which is Jerusalem. And while he's been in captivity and in slavery, he has worked his way up to where he has found favor with the king, King Artaxerxes. And he goes to the king and he asks, he said, hey, can I take a group of Israelites back to Jerusalem? I want to go back and rebuild the walls. You see, for an ancient city like Jerusalem, when your walls have fallen down, when they've been torn down, it's the destruction of your city, because walls meant protection. They meant safety. That was part of your identity because those walls were what allowed you to have community among the people that you lived with. And so Nehemiah, he goes back to Jerusalem, but he's got a huge challenge ahead of him because he's got to take a volunteer work crew with very little resources, all at the same time where there's people attacking and he's got enemies on all different fronts. And he's got this massive job to do. So here we are in Nehemiah chapter 5. And where we're at today is a point in the story where about half of the wall is up. They're about halfway done with completing this wall. But look at what happens right here in the middle of this scene, starting in verse 1. It says this: Now there was a great outcry of the people and their wives against their Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, We, our sons and daughters, are many. Therefore, Therefore, let us get grain that we may eat to live. In case you didn't know, you got to have a little food, got to have a little substance just to live. But then they go on and say, there were others who said, we're mortgaging our fields and our vineyards and our houses that we might get grain because of the famine. You see, at this time, there's an economic downturn. Times are hard. And so people are having to mortgage off all of their things just to get food to survive. Also, it says, there were those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's taxes on our fields and on our vineyards. Now, our flesh is like the flesh of our brothers, our children like their children. Yet behold, we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters are being forced into bondage already. And we're helpless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others. You see, these are hard times. Not only are the walls of Jerusalem down, not only is this city unprotected, not only are they trying to do this big project, but times are hard financially. So much so that there is such a weight of the king's taxes on them, King Artaxerxes from Persia, that they're having to mortgage off their houses, their fields, their vineyards, even their children they're having to put into debt servitude so that they can just eat to survive. But the problem is that Jerusalem is like any city. There are some families that are very well off. There are some families that are just kind of making it. And then there are some families that are really struggling. And this is the cry from those families that are really struggling. They're saying, hey, we've had to pay it all just to survive. So much so, not only that all of our stuff is mortgaged off just to pay the taxes, just so we have enough food, but we've also had to put our children into slavery just to survive. And you would maybe expect that if that was all happening from an outside enemy. But that's not the case in this story. No. They are being mortgaged and enslaved by their own people. By their own Jewish brothers and sisters have now put this burden on them. And here's this tension that Nehemiah is feeling right here in the middle of this, and that is that you can build a wall for protection, but at the same time still lose the people that are in sight. And Nehemiah is feeling that tension, and really the way he responds is really the whole message of this lesson this morning. It's really three things, not a checklist, but really it's a picture of what it means to lead from the inside out. And that's really what Nehemiah does. But look at what happens in Nehemiah chapter 5, starting in verse 6. It says this, "Then I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these words." Now notice a couple things here. Nehemiah knew what was happening. He could hear directly from the people that he was leading and the people that he was working with, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but again, remember we talked about proximity and presence. You know, we've talked about how easy it is to kind of check out and miss the people around you. Well, of all the people that might have missed something, you would think it's Nehemiah, because he's got a lot going on. He's got this massive construction project. He's got these enemies at the gate that are all after him. They don't want him to build the wall. But yet in the middle of all this, he hears what's going on within his community. He hears what's going on with the people. But notice his reaction and the way he handles it. And, you know, sometimes we do this. We miss things that are happening around us. Maybe you've been in this situation before where, you know, you come into your house, you know, and your family's kind of cruising along, but you're not really paying attention to all the things that just aren't quite right. Maybe things are unsettled with your spouse. Maybe your kids are a little bit off. Maybe there's some stuff that is below the surface that you're not paying attention to. Here is the point where Nehemiah actually was paying attention. And this is one of the things that I want to share with you. Let this statement sink in a little bit. Presence isn't proximity. Presence isn't proximity. In other words, just because you're in the room with somebody doesn't mean you are fully present or fully engaged with them. We can be sitting right next to somebody who we love, care about, and not be engaged with them. But this is one of the things I love about Nehemiah. With all the things that he has got going on, he is tuned in. He is engaged. Now, I know this happened a number of times in my own house where, average Tuesday night, I'm there and, my kids are coming in from all different activities and school and different things. And a number of times one of my kids would come in and start talking about maybe something in, one of their relationships with their friends, or maybe something that was going on in school. And you never knew which version of me you were going to get. There's the one version of me that, they come in and they're talking and I'm like, paying attention to something else, half listening, but not really engaged. But then there's another version, and I think we can all do this, and that is when the people that are closest to us, the people that matter the most to us, when they're really sharing something, instead of keeping one eye on a screen or having our head somewhere else, that we turn off those other things. We turn off that part of our brain that is not paying attention, and we fully engage with those people who we love and we care about. That's exactly what was going on with Nehemiah. He is a great example of somebody who had a lot going on, a lot of pressure, a lot of multitasking is going on, but yet he never lost sight of what he was doing and why he was doing it. He was doing it for God's people. And when the people cried out, hey, this is happening, he was paying attention. So look at what happens here, Nehemiah chapter 5, starting in verse 7. It says this, I consulted with myself and contended with the nobles and the rulers and said to them, you are exacting usury from each of your brothers. I love that line. I think that's one of the most underrated lines in this chapter. I consulted with myself. You see, Nehemiah heard what was going on and it made him angry. But he didn't automatically react like some of us often do. Instead, he took that anger and he processed it. He put it through a filter before it came out of his mouth. Now, I know there's some of us that struggle with that. I know some of you grew up in a home where the feeling around your house was really tempered by maybe one person in your family that often their anger came out in unpleasant ways. And because of that, you learned to read footsteps. You learned to discover who was in the house and when you needed to hide out and when you needed to be available. Because you didn't want to get in the way of some of those words that were coming, not because of you, but they were still coming at you. And if we're honest, some of us, maybe if you grew up in a household like that, we've kept some of those same tendencies, and we've allowed some of the things that make us angry or frustrated. We've allowed our anger to be put on some folks that really were never part of our frustration. I know I've done that before in my house. Not proud of it, but that's something that we have to struggle, or we have to fight against. And Nehemiah does this great picture of how to do that. He says, I consulted myself. So in other words, when something made me angry, I put it through a process. I put it through a filter before it came out. And because he did this, he had great success in his communication. Nehemiah, he was disciplined emotionally. He processed it. Instead, he channeled his anger and used it in a responsible way for the people that he was in charge of. Look at Nehemiah chapter 5, verses 12 and 13. It says, then they said, this is talking about the nobles and the rulers, the folks that he's kind of getting on at this point about what they are doing. They say, we will give it back and will require nothing from them. We'll do exactly what you say. So I called the priest and took an oath from them that they would do according to his promise. I also shook out the front of my garment and said, thus may God shake out every man from his house and from his possessions who does not fulfill this promise. Even thus may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, Amen. And they praised the Lord, and the people did according to his promise. You see, because of Nehemiah's reaction, because instead of just lashing out when he saw something go wrong, instead he consulted with himself. He put his anger through a filter so he had an opportunity to communicate better. And when he did, results happened. Fields were returned. Debts were canceled. Families were restored. Now, Nehemiah could have taken his authority and he could have used this in a different way. He could have used this as his advantage. I mean, here he had some leverage over these nobles and over these folks that were really mistreating their brothers and sisters. But instead, he didn't worry about that. He just wanted to make things right. And when he did, the people that he was leading, the people he was caring for, they benefited from that. And this isn't a concept that's just from the Old Testament. You really see this same concept throughout the New Testament. You see it as the Apostle Paul, as he writes to the different churches. One of those I think about in Philippians chapter 2. Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 says, each of you should look not only to your own interests, but look to the interests of others. You see, as brothers and sisters in Christ, we're supposed to treat each other with kindness. We're supposed to treat each other with fairness. We're not supposed to lord anything over each other. Instead, we're supposed to be people of integrity. We're supposed to do the hard things, which is sacrifice for each other. In fact, Paul writes this right before he describes our model, which is Jesus Christ. He says you should have the same attitude as that of Jesus Christ, who being the very nature of God, didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. You see, it was Jesus who could have held his title, held his position, but instead, he gave himself. He sacrificed himself for our good so that we can have a relationship with the Father. That's what trust is built on. It's not built on power. Trust is built on sacrifice. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to treat each other with kindness, with respect, with fairness. See, when we use when we use what we have for someone else's good instead of our own, that's what builds trust. It's what builds trust within a marriage. It's what builds trust within a family. That builds trust anytime you're in a leadership position when you're working with other people. And that's certainly how we build trust within a church like Cornerstone. So here's the question. Do the people in your life, do they truly feel better by your interaction with them? In other words, when they leave a conversation to you, do they feel better about themselves or do they feel worse? You see, your influence, your impact on other people should leave people wanting and feeling better about themselves. Your influence isn't about your comfort. Instead, your influence is about helping others flourish. Now, the third thing that Nehemiah does here in this story in Nehemiah chapter 5 is he then turns the lens on himself and does a little self-evaluation as we're talking about what's going on within their community. Take a look at Nehemiah 5, verses 14 and 15. It says this, "Moreover, from the day that I was appointed to be governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, for 12 years, neither I or my kinsmen have eaten the governor's food allowance. But former governors who were there before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants domineered the people, but I didn't do so because of the fear of God." See, what had happened is each governor that was ruling over Judah, they had an opportunity. They had tax, they had funds, they had things that were, allowed them to operate and to live a very comfortable lifestyle. But that was all at the expense of the people. Nehemiah says, I had that opportunity, and I never took it. I never took that. Why? Because of the fear of God. Now that phrase might be a little bit unsettling to some of you, but please understand, when you're in relationship with God, you understand that God is always with you. God is part of your life, and He's with you whether you're at church or whether you're at home or at your office. God does not leave you because you're in relationship with Him. And because of that, there's a settled conviction that God is watching, and His opinion is really ultimately the only one that matters. And it's that conviction that shapes what you do, whether or not anyone is looking or not. And it's not fear that paralyzes. It's a reverence that anchors us, that grounds us in our life to make sure that, hey, I want to not please my fellow man, but I want to please God, because He can see everything that we do. And Nehemiah's restraint wasn't self-discipline. It wasn't about reputation management. Instead, it was rooted in something private in his relationship as he was oriented towards God. And it was that governed his life and all of his decisions, even the ones that happened in private, when no one else saw, when no one else was looking. This verse says that Nehemiah, out of his own resources, for 12 years, never took the governor's allowance, never took the privilege that he had, but instead he would feed 150 people every day out of his own resources. He didn't take land when everyone else took it. He gave quietly without keeping score. And when he looked back on all of his life, here is what he asked. And this kind of goes back to the first question that I asked you. When it comes to the end of your days, when the people closest to you describe you, what do you want them to say? Here's what Nehemiah says. Verse 19. He says, "Remember me, O God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people." Nehemiah didn't really care about folks remembering him for all of his accomplishments, for his title as governor. He doesn't even really want to be remembered for the guy who restored Jerusalem, who built back the wall, who brought the children of Israel back and made them powerful again. No, when it came to his ending days, he wanted to be remembered for good. You see, integrity isn't a performance. Integrity is who you are when nobody else is watching. And here's what I know about the people that we live with. They're always the ones that find out who we really are because they're with us each and every day. Not the version of us that gets dressed up on Sunday and comes to church and says, "Hi, how you doing?" and smiles and looks great. Your family, those closest to you, those folks living under your roof, they know who you are on a Tuesday, and they know who you are when you walk out the door. The question isn't whether or not you have influence over the people in your life. You have influence. The question is, what are you building in the process? Are you using your influence in the right way? And I know for some of you like me, that your kiddos are grown up. They're gone. They're out of the house. And I know that it's easy to look back and think, boy, I really missed out on some opportunities. But I will be the first one to tell you it's never too late. It's never too late to repair, to fix maybe some things that you broke along the way, to restore some relationships that maybe need some healing, maybe to do some things differently now than you did before. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of great strength. When you go to those people who are closest to you and say, I'm not the same person I used to be. I struggled at different times. You don't have to make excuses. You can just say, I want to change now. I want to do better. I want to have a deeper relationship with you. And I know for some of you all, this week might not be about doing a grand gesture for somebody in your life, but instead it might be a phone call or maybe a conversation that you just want to have with, a parent, a brother, a sister, a son or a daughter, somebody that matters a lot to you, but yet there's been some distance. And maybe it's you just saying, hey, I want to take the first step in repairing our relationship. I would like for our relationship from here on out to be different. I want to encourage you not to let that moment pass as you're thinking about who that might be in your life. In fact, I would encourage you to write that down right now. Maybe text yourself. Maybe set an appointment right now. I'm going to call, you fill in the blank. Make the time this week to take that next step. One more short passage that I want to share with you. It's easy to miss, but I think it's one of the most clear pictures of what we're building towards. This comes from the New Testament as the Apostle John was writing to a man named Gaius. Now, Gaius was not his flesh and blood. It was not his son. It was not a relative of his. Gaius was just somebody that the Apostle John invested in. He spent time with him, mentoring him, sharing life with him, being that example for him. But look at what he says, 3 John chapter 1, verse 4. It says, I have no greater joy than this, to hear my children are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear my children are walking in the truth. That was the ultimate goal for John. It wasn't about, his children being happy or successful. It was wanting to know that the people that he cares about are walking in God's truth, that they know who they are and they know where they're headed. Now understand, Gaius is not his flesh and blood, but John invested in this person, and so I think this verse is a little bit wider than sometimes what we think. We often think of this as maybe just a parenting verse, thinking about our own kids, but I think in light of the context of that, it's really much wider than that. For those of you that are mentors, maybe you're mentoring somebody at your job that you really care about. You've built a friendship and you're pouring into them not only skills at work, but you're pouring into them about things in your life and maybe your faith. You're pouring into them. You want the very best for them. For those of you that are teachers, for those of you that are coaches, this verse is also for you because you're pouring into other people by your investment in them. And you notice here, both of these folks that we're talking about today, both the Apostle John as well as Nehemiah, although hundreds of years separated them, they both wanted the same thing. They wanted at the end of their life, the people around them, they wanted to be known for doing good, to having influence in their lives, to really making a difference. There is no greater joy, not success, not wealth. It's walking in the truth. That's what they are known for. Why? Because people become who they watch. You might not think you have a whole lot of influence, but trust me, you have influence by the people that you are surrounded by. They're watching the things you do, both in public as well as they're watching your character and the outcomes of your life. Nehemiah's prayer was, remember me for good. John's prayer was having that joy of watching the people that he poured into walk in the truth. Two men, the same journey. So imagine now the people that you care about. Years from now, maybe your kids as they're grown, maybe your grandchildren. How do you want them to remember you? Are they going to remember those memories where you were present in their life, where you were pouring into them, where you were fully engaged? Do the people in your home have your full presence? Now, we all know that we all have some blind spots in our life, right? I know I've got plenty of blind spots where I don't often see all the things that I'm missing. My wife is really good about helping me with that. At times, there are moments where I've been so engaged with what I'm doing that I missed moments with my kids. I remember as our kids got older and the bedtimes got later, and this was beyond the time where I was telling stories with them. As our kids got into high school, into college, and even as they began to start bringing their spouses home with them, late at night, everybody would typically end up in our room, on the bed all together. And by that time, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, sometimes later, I'm done. I'm done. I'm ready to check out. And the kids are coming in and they're telling us about things that are going on in their life, and they're asking questions, and we're having fun together, and I would start to fade, and I would feel the elbow. Jenny would say, "Don't miss this. Don't miss these moments with your kids." Sometimes the days seem very long, but the years go by so quickly. And we have those moments with those people that we care about. We have that opportunity to connect with them, to love them, and to pass on our faith to them. We do that each and every day. So here's the challenge this week. One conversation, one real conversation, maybe your spouse, maybe with your kids, maybe with a parent, whoever that you've been on the surface with maybe for a time. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to redirect it. Don't try to defend yourself. Instead, just ask, how are they doing? And then wait. Truly engage with them. I want to encourage you again. Write down that name of who it is that you need to connect with this week. You don't fix a family all at once, just the same as a wall. Instead, you make the next right move, one after another, and it's those compounding moves that end up building something that lasts. Not your career, not your house, not your reputation, the people under your roof. That's what building something lasts that means. Today, if you're with us and maybe you're feeling like, I want to make some changes in my life. Maybe today you want to make some changes in your relationship with God. Maybe you've been coming to church for a little while, and maybe your faith is growing, and maybe you're ready to take some next steps. We'd love to have that conversation with you about some of those next steps in your journey with God. Or maybe today there's just some things that are heavy on your heart. Maybe it's one of those relationships that you've had a difficult time getting past. Maybe there's been some hurt in your life with one of those relationships, and you've had a hard time forgiving somebody. Maybe today needs to be the day that you turn loose of that. Maybe forgive them, even when they don't ask for forgiveness. I promise you, things will move to a different place. Maybe today you want to pray with somebody just about some needs. We love to meet you where you are today. And so right after our service, if you would like to sit and visit with somebody, some of our elders are here with us today. I'd love to spend some time talking with you, praying over you. If there's any need that you have today, we'd love to meet you right where you are. But before we do, I want to pray over us just as a church family, and really just ask God to step into each of our lives as we are building something together. Let's bow in prayer. Our Father God, we are just so grateful for this church family, that we can come here together and just admit there's not any of us that are perfect here. We've all had those moments where we have not been present. We've had those days where we've come up short. Father, we have had those days where we have hurt the people around us. Father, forgive us for that. Forgive us of our sin in our life, sometimes when our anger gets the best of us. Maybe our distractions get too much for us. Father, I pray that you would help us focus. Focus on the people and the things that are most important in this life. Help us not to be distracted by all the things of this world, but help us focus on our relationship with you. I'm so thankful for this church family and the way that this